Jeffrey Katzenberg raised $1.75 billion to build the future of mobile entertainment. 6 months later, the app was dead, and its entire content library sold to Roku for less than $100 million. Along the way, a $5.6 million Super Bowl ad that didn't explain what the product actually was. A signature feature called Turnstile that got them sued before they had a single paying customer. And the staggering moment when 90% of their users vanished overnight. Not because they churned slowly, but because they never intended to stay. But everything, the bad timing, the pandemic, the mediocre shows, all of it traces back to one structural decision made before a single frame of content was ever filmed. One choice that guaranteed nothing else could save them. It wasn't the price. It wasn't the marketing. It wasn't even COVID. In August 2018, Jeffrey Katzenberg filed paperwork for a company called New TV. The name was bland. The vision wasn't. Katzenberg wasn't some first-time founder chasing a trend. He'd been chairman of Walt Disney Studios during the animation renaissance, the era of The Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast. He co-founded DreamWorks Animation, produced Shrek. The man had spent 3 decades turning stories into billions of dollars. His thesis was simple. There's a gap between the 30-second TikTok clip and the 2-hour Netflix movie. Premium, Hollywood-quality content in 7 to 10-minute episodes, designed exclusively for your phone. Watch it on the subway. Watch it in a coffee line. Watch it anywhere you have 5 minutes to kill. To run the operation, he recruited Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay, former CEO of Hewlett-Packard. 2 resumes that, on paper, covered both Hollywood and Silicon Valley. The pitch worked. Disney invested. Goldman Sachs invested. Then JP Morgan. Then Alibaba. Sony Pictures. NBC Universal. Lionsgate. MGM. By launch, they'd raised $1.75 billion. More money than any media startup in history. Before acquiring a single user. And that number should have been the first warning sign. Quibi's engineering centerpiece was a proprietary system they called Turnstile. Every piece of content was filmed and edited in 2 separate formats, landscape and portrait, simultaneously. Rotate your phone, and the video seamlessly switched between the 2 versions in real time, without interrupting playback. It was genuinely novel, and genuinely expensive. Every show had to be shot with 2 framings in mind. Every edit had to work twice. This effectively doubled post-production costs across the entire content library. They spent roughly $6 million per hour of produced content. For context, a typical Netflix original drama costs between $3 million and $8 million per hour, but those episodes are 45 to 60 minutes long. Quibi's episodes were 7 minutes. Do the math. Per minute of screen time, Quibi was one of the most expensive content operations ever assembled. They hired executives from Instagram, Hulu, Netflix, and Snapchat. They signed A-list talent, Steven Spielberg, Jennifer Lopez, Reese Witherspoon, LeBron James, Idris Elba, Kevin Hart, Anna Kendrick, Chrissy Teigen. Before launch, they'd locked in $150 million in advertising commitments from Google, Procter & Gamble, Pepsi, and Walmart. They also secured a distribution partnership with T-Mobile, giving 83 million U.S. subscribers free access to Quibi. Then they spent over $100 million on awareness marketing, including that $5.6 million Super Bowl spot, an ad so abstract that most viewers couldn't tell what the product actually did. Everything was in place. The launch date was set, April 6, 2020. Except that's not what the world looked like on April 6, 2020. Quibi launched 3 weeks into the United States' first COVID-19 lockdowns. The entire value proposition, watch premium content on the go, evaporated overnight. Nobody was commuting. Nobody was waiting in lines. Everyone was stuck at home, staring at the biggest screen they owned. And Quibi? Quibi didn't have a TV app. By design. Katzenberg blamed the pandemic publicly. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. During the exact same months, Disney Plus gained tens of millions of subscribers. Netflix had what it called a blockbuster year. TikTok, an app that is also only on phones, exploded to over 800 million monthly active users worldwide. The pandemic didn't kill mobile entertainment. It killed the specific kind of mobile entertainment that cost $8 a month and couldn't be shared. Because here's the detail that still shocks people. Quibi launched without screenshot capability. You couldn't clip a scene. You couldn't share a moment to Twitter or Instagram. In 2020, the year memes became the primary distribution engine for culture. Quibi built a walled garden with no doors. The only Quibi clip that ever went viral was a scene from a show called Murder House Flip, recorded by someone pointing a second phone at their screen. Meanwhile, the content itself had a deeper problem. Quibi needed to fill a massive content library fast to justify that $1.75 billion. So they bought aggressively. Industry insiders later described the process bluntly. If we have a show that's going to be a huge hit, you pitch to Netflix, HBO. If it doesn't get traction, you pitch to Quibi. They were buying the content that everyone else had already passed on, and then chopping feature-length projects into 7-minute segments they were never designed for. The result felt like watching a movie through a mail slot. And then the numbers started to arrive. First month, 3.5 million downloads. Sounds impressive, but only 1.3 million became active users. And all of them were on the 90-day free trial. In July 2020, when those free trials expired, the bottom fell out. Sensor Tower reported that just 72,000 of the roughly 910,000 users who'd signed up at launch converted to paid subscribers. That's an 8% conversion rate. Quibi disputed the numbers, but never released their own. What nobody on the outside knew yet was how fast the cash was burning on the inside. By the third quarter of 2020, Quibi had already spent $1 billion of its $1.75 billion war chest. They projected needing another $200 million by mid-2021 just to keep the lights on. Senior executives took 10% pay cuts. Katzenberg sent emails late at night trying to find buyers. He approached Apple, Warner Media, Facebook, NBC Universal. Nobody bit. And there was a reason no one would buy them. But that reason is the real story here. On October 21st, 2020, Katzenberg and Whitman called their investors. Then their 250 employees. Then they posted an open letter. Quibi is not succeeding. The numbers tell the rest. Peak projected subscribers, 7.2 million by end of year one. Actual subscribers, roughly 500,000. Pre-launch ad revenue commitments, $150 million. Post-launch reality, advertisers fleeing a platform with no audience. Headcount went from 260 to 0. The company returned $350 million to investors, out of $1.75 billion raised. On December 1st, 2020, the app stopped working. It simply returned an error message when you try to log in. In January 2021, Roku bought the content library for less than $100 million. Quibi had spent over $1 billion creating it. So what actually killed Quibi? Every post-mortem you've read blames some combination of COVID, bad content, and bad timing. Those are symptoms. The disease was architectural, and it was baked in before Katzenberg raised his first dollar. Quibi's fatal flaw was building a distribution platform and an original content studio simultaneously, while owning neither permanently. Here's what that means. Quibi didn't own its content outright. It licensed shows for a window, reportedly around 7 years, after which rights reverted to the creators. That's not Netflix's model. Netflix spends billions on content, but Netflix owns its originals in perpetuity. That ownership creates a compounding content library. Every dollar Netflix spends today still generates value in 2030. Quibi was renting. Every dollar they spent was depreciating from the moment it was signed. And that meant any potential acquirer wasn't buying a content library. They were buying a countdown clock. That's why Apple passed. That's why Facebook passed. There was nothing to buy, but it gets worse. Because Quibi also didn't own its distribution. It was an app in someone else's app store. It had no existing user base, no social graph, no network effects. Compare that to TikTok, which was free, algorithmically viral, and built an audience of hundreds of millions through user-generated content that cost TikTok nothing to produce. Quibi tried to be a platform and a studio at the same time, but structured itself so it couldn't fully succeed at either. The $1.75 billion didn't buy durable assets. It bought temporary content, an unproven app, and a Super Bowl ad. When the content didn't hit, there was no flywheel, no user-generated content, no social sharing, no algorithmic discovery to compensate. The money didn't just enable the mistake. The money was the mistake. It let them skip the phase where you learn what your audience actually wants. They spent $1 billion on content before a single user told them what they liked. They built the entire restaurant, hired the staff, printed the menus, and opened the doors, without ever asking anyone if they were hungry. If you're building a platform, there's a question more important than can I raise the money? It's this: what do I permanently own that gets more valuable the more people use it? Netflix owns content. YouTube owns the creator ecosystem. TikTok owns the algorithm and the social graph. Quibi owned a 7-year lease and a feature called Turnstile. Before you raise $1 billion, build something small enough to learn from. Because the most expensive lesson in startup history is this: money can buy content, talent, and attention, but it cannot buy product market fit. And if you don't own the thing that compounds, you're not building a company. You're renting one. If you want to see another billion-dollar empire collapse in slow motion, one where the founder convinced everyone he was running a tech company until the math made that impossible to ignore, watch the WeWork postmortem. Links on screen now.